We are back on Break Time University and Break Time TV, and I am joined by the one and only Rob Hunter, who the last couple episodes I've been interviewing him, which is something he's not used to. Normally he's the host because he's got this great voice. And we've joked a few times about how he's been stopped in grocery stores and people recognize him by the voice, never seen his face. They probably even go, huh, I wonder if that's Rob. But, him and Russell were talking about this and that the other day and blah, blah, blah. And so he's been in the business for 30 years. So I'm going to, as part of Rob is a communications coach. I'm going to put Rob on the spot. I want to see a classic Rob Hunter voice.
Uh-oh.
Rob, you got give a 15 to 30-second best voice impression, best of what they're going to find on robhunter.me. Give
You,
your little
Patrick,
commercial.
are going to find a bunch of links to help you become more effective as a communicator. This is my news broadcaster voice. You will find the Get Clear framework, which you can download for free to build your communication skills to deliver that message more effectively, whether that's at work, at home, it's out with your friends. And of course, there are methods at robhunter.me to get in contact with me. So if you do have a specific question that pertains to you, shoot me over a DM on LinkedIn or Instagram.
Wow. The only talent I have when it comes to voice is shady.
Which is pretty good. Or you could do, yeah, drop it down and try to do like a James Earl Jones or something like, Luke, I am your father.
Mine was Scooby Doo. I just know that when my kids were little, I just somehow ripped it off one time and it just stuck. So I joke about this because Rob does voice work for a living. I used to announce gymnastics meets. My wife says he talks pretty much for a living. He's got a good voice. So, and one of the classic moments when the little kids session would be gone, I go, Shaggy, and the kids would whip around and kind of gets me to,
I
boy,
love it.
we really regress. This is going to attract the listeners. Patrick Tucker,
Let's just have you do impressions the rest of the episode and see what we can come up with.
that might be could see our ratings go in the tank. But I also like to think about, and this is something I'm going to hit you with, and I want to hear your reaction. But you've talked about this a couple times, how the only way you could ever get better as a radio host, you would sit down with your production managers, the crews, the producer, and you listen to yourself talk. And I would bet if we are doing a survey right now, and this was live, and you ask people, uh, how many of you like to listen to your voice on your voicemail? How many of you like to set your voicemail up? How would you like to listen to your calls? Listen to your own voice radio? The answer would be 90% no. How do you change that for people, Rob?
I make them do it. I mean, that's the only way. It was just the first time sitting in my boss's office, listening to something I said on the air, a 3-minute clip, an 8-minute clip, whatever it was that he pulled. It was excruciating because you're thinking about every single thing you did wrong, said wrong. You just got to do it. You just got to rip the Band-Aid off because there's no easy way around it. And I just understand something. You sound different when you record yourself than you hear yourself. So actually, I was taught this technique once where if you put your hands over your ears and you kind of cup them a little bit, you sound like you would to someone else. Now, again, I don't know how to prove that because I only have my own hearing. But if you do this, you notice, oh, I do sound a little bit different. So if you are having some challenges with listening to yourself, try that first because your automatic reaction when you hear yourself on a recording, and you can just use your phone. And I would advocate anybody do this. Anybody that wants to become better as a communicator, talk into your phone for 2 minutes and listen to it. And then you'll understand, okay, I sound different than I do in my own head. That's okay. And then number two, just do it. And just really don't be too hard on yourself. Know that you're doing it to improve and don't press pause. Just gut through it and write down some ideas on what you could do better and then try that out and record again. And eventually you get used to it. And then you understand that you're doing it for a positive intention to become more effective with your word choices.
So I'm going to play off of that because I was told I had a pretty good speaking voice at one point, and I worked to refine it. Someone taught me one time something to consider is a telephone is a microphone. It will amplify good and bad. And so I asked myself one time that, okay, how do I get in the mode or the mood to, we talk about gymnastics announcing, how did you really bring the passion out? And so I always say this, what's something I know I'm good at? And I like to play golf and probably hit the ball a little farther than the average person. And I'm certainly far better with a driver and a 3 wood than a 7 iron. That is my weapon of mass destruction is a 7 iron, 8 iron. I mean, total disaster. But I got into that mindset where, okay, how do I physically feel with a driver in my hand? And then try to replicate that feeling with the 7 iron. It's no different. Think about when I go to talk and how I want my voice to sound. I want to mimic that feeling that I have with the driver, that level of confidence. And I was coached that one time because when you do that, it comes out quite a bit. And so many people, when it comes just to talking and communication, I feel they're just not confident. Their content is probably good, but they lack that confidence. And so I see that as something, put the driver in your hand, whatever club that is, whatever you're really good at in life, and then mimic that feeling. And I just found that that was such a great thing. And then Rob given his promotion, I mean, of his of RobHunter.me. I mean, think about that. Uh, Talk
So
about your weather.
you're nailing it, Patrick, because it's about finding something in yourself that you love. So I was recently working with a client on his keynote, and he's got a great theory about how you engineer your serendipity. You got to make it happen. And he has his whole process. So what I worked on with him is pulling stories out of him that related to engineering serendipity. And then you could see the passion because that's his experience and how he learned these hard lessons. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for your gold because it gets you in that state where you're ready to crush that drive and you're just going to hit it straight 300 yards down the fairway and you're going to give yourself a good position to hit your 7 iron.
Foot wedge maybe is probably the
Yeah,
better.
that's my drive. My drive is a slice to the right every time. I've been doing it since I was 12. So we're closing in on, let's see, what, 36 years of that or 34 years of slicing.
Well, I'm very lucky that I have a good friend, Roger, who taught me some. I was terrible for years and I hated it. And then my infamous friend, Roger Hall. Roger, I hope you're out there. I don't know why you moved back to Minnesota, but that's you can't play golf in the snow there, Raj. But
Yeah. You
he
got
taught
half
me
of
how
off
to hit.
season up there.
He saw something in my swing, fixed it, and still to this day I can pound that right to left drive a long way. It's when golf is fun again. No politics here, folks. Patrick is ripping that right to left drive or draw. It makes golf a lot of fun. So, but
Hmm.
you talked in our last segment about clear and how important that was, and you talk about preparation, and they go hand in hand. If you're not prepared, it's almost impossible to be clear. And as you talked about just all the different pieces, expand upon that from when we talked last time, the things that why people either succeed at your method or don't.
It's all about the work, right? I wish there was a shortcut for this, whether it's personal development, communication, business, success. I wish that there was a magic button we could press and all the work that we have to do would go away, but it doesn't. Anything you want to get better at, I love this phrase beginner mind, Zen mind. Whereas if you understand, if you go back into your childlike being and you're 5 years old and you experience something for the first time, you're really curious about it. And you pick it up and you look at it. And you might ask your dad 400 questions about that item that you picked up just because you want to know more about it. That is a way to, at least that I've applied to any new topic of conversation that I might come into is I need to prepare and I need to treat this topic like I'm a 5 year old in the sandbox and I'm here to explore because once I do that, I'm better prepared to deliver whatever I need to deliver. So going back to that work, and that's why the clear framework is so important, because it's a built-in prep process for you that forces you to brainstorm. Because oftentimes we get that first idea and we're like, I'm good. But then we don't think about how to explain that idea. And then we're trying to explain it on the fly, and we end up using too many words and too many commas because we haven't filtered anything out. So that's why the preparation process is so important, because as you probably understand in the business world, Patrick, there's a lot of failures in life. There's a lot of failures in business, a lot of failures in communication that you have to learn from. And you have to go back and say, all right, what's that lesson I need to learn? Why did I not get this contract? Why did I not get this sale? Why did this pitch fall flat? Why did the boss not respond to my answer? And you can pick up nuggets from that that further add to your preparation process for next time. So it's like a constant. Now, for me, it was so easy. I was a radio background, radio talk show host. So I was doing this every single day. But we all need to do it every single day because that communication piece is so important to almost every single thing that we do.
So, I mean, one thing I feel in listening to what you said, and you've been a radio show host and you did that in your 30 years of your life. Do you ever find yourself that you just had to do something to register in your mind to keep in the mode each and every day? Because your voice and you being on the radio, you had to be at your A game every day. It's not like you could go half-ass it and say, I'm going to kind of make myself look busy for the next hour and a half, do my expense reports and go home. You are in the mode. So what did you do to be on top of your game? I'd be fascinated to hear that. I would imagine that was tough.
Yeah, some days, I mean, some of the news stories that I had to learn about weren't exactly uplifting. Some of them were terrible. Terrible things happen in the world. And I had to figure out how to explain it, talk about it, have an opinion about it, an insight about tragic events where I didn't want to bring everybody too down in the dumps. But for me, it really came down to caring and passion. I loved what I did. And I got to talk about the news of this country and the cultural events of this country. So for me, having a passion attached to that was the key to keep me going. And if you're in your own business, and you can talk about this, Patrick, and having to talk about all the things and the pitches and negotiations, what kept you going to have you wanting to stay on top of your game and not just mail it in? Because for me, it really just came down to that passion about what I was doing and how much I love it.
So maybe it's a good time we had talked about it that we were going to flip roles because I've spent 2.5, 2 3/4 segments interviewing Rob, which you got to remember trying to interview the pros. It's like me playing golf against Tiger Woods. I mean, that's just talk about a drive. You feel like an idiot after you do it. You're so good at it. So it's your turn to turn it on me and fire away because I got to now practice what I've been watching the expert do.
Yeah. Is there a time you can think of where you did not communicate something effectively and it maybe led to a deal falling through or some confusion in the workplace? I know it's tough because you're on the spot, but it's important to understand. Like for me, I'll give you a couple minutes to think here. How many times I tried to deliver a story or share a story that just didn't quite land, or I wasn't clear enough, and I would go back and listen and be like, "Oh, that was muddy. Oh, I could just hear radios turning off, turning on music stations, and moving away from what I was saying."
Yes, I've got that. And in my life, I really kind of consider I've had three phases of my careers. I started my second one where I got into selling technology to county jail administrators. That meant sheriffs, law enforcement, jail. I where I found myself initially having a lot of success, but then I got, if you want to call it, comfortable. I got to a point where I felt like I could keep doing the same thing and the same result would happen. And when I had one that I thought that I had, it was that aha moment when I called and said, I got an email that says you're not going with us, and why? And well, the finance person didn't feel like they really got anything out of it, and that you kind of skinned that over. So in a couple of these segments, you talked about the audience. And it was one of the most valuable lessons that I got was to make sure that I read my audience and what was important to each person that was in the room. And as I went along in the next couple meetings, the folks that deal with the numbers and the money need detailed answers, but you have to be cognizant of the time. The whole audience can't sit where you're trying to dig through really the depth and details the numbers require. So I gave a strong enough answer, and I said, would it be okay that we also do a separate meeting, even if I stay after this or we schedule another one, to go in depth with you so you feel that I've covered everything, yet that we cover everything for everybody else. So it took me doing a deep reflection after I failed and adjusting. And it really led to a lot of success as we moved forward.
How did you apply that, Patrick, going forward to create future success? In if you were looking at success in building businesses, which you've done so tremendously well, and I've learned so much from you about that aspect in the year plus we've been hanging out. How much is communication a factor in that success?
It's everything. I've used this analogy many, many times, and when I've talked about speaking, because I've look at different things. There's a lot of different teachings out there, and ones that I've even created. You need to be passionate when you talk. You really need to realize you are presenting. You got to understand the psychology of everybody in the room, the pitch, the pace. I could go on, but Wayne Gretzky is the most prolific, best hockey player of all time. Now, there might be people that might score more goals here this year in their career, but I think it's universally agreed upon, if not the best, certainly first or second, third. Reality is, wasn't a great skater. He wasn't the best skater, but he was the best at one of the most critical things, the vision to see where everybody else was, where they were going, where the holes were, the opportunities. And he practiced that. And if you watched any of his interviews, he was always working on the vision of the game. And so it taught me that to teach others, there's certain skills, and I've talked about this, math and communication. If you master that and you really are great at communicating your product, your purpose for being there, how it can help them. I mean, everybody's favorite radio station, not the one that Rob Hunter was on. It's WIIFM. What's in it for me? You don't communicate that and appease that radio station. It doesn't matter how good your product is. As I described, you could give them a $10,000 check. Is you have to appeal to and communicate effectively. And when you don't, whether I was leading people and I failed, I didn't get a sale, I didn't get that next client, I trace all of it back to, is the first thing I look at is what was the message? How did I communicate it? What was the audience? Where did I miss? And you got to take action to correct it, because if you just do it one way, you're ticking off at least 2/3 of the audience every single time. And so that's master that. If you could be a great communicator, both talking and listening, you can do anything. Your skills are transferable to anything on this planet.
And you can, I think, with communication, create opportunities for yourself out of nowhere. So when I was a young broadcaster, I think I was 22 or 23. I worked on a Christmas Eve because a low guy, you got to go and press the buttons. Well, my boss is like, if you're feeling like doing a segment or two, and a segment or two in radio is about 8 to 10 minutes, depending on, how the commercial breaks line up. I did 4, and he caught me and he called me, and I'm like, oh man, am I in trouble? And he's like, no, it actually was very good. So because I took that chance, I created an opportunity for myself simply because I was prepared and I knew what I was going to do, and I did it. understanding who the audience was at the time. So the very same thing that you're talking about there, Patrick, is how important understanding that ideal person is or who that audience is. And if you are a brand, we do an ideal customer, ideal client exercise that really hones in. Like we knew our guy was a guy, male business owner here in the Valley, probably making 150,000. He drives an F-150. That's who we were communicating with. So it helps you filter your message the right way because you know what that person wants. You get inside their head and allows you to communicate to them for maximum success. So for you, Patrick, a few months back, you had to fly, I think it was up to Salt Lake. You had a big meeting and you're going to give this big presentation. How much time did you spend preparing for this big presentation, for this big business conversation that you were having?
It started at least, I think, 3 weeks prior, and you and several others saw the how many revisions to the pitch, to the book, to the message. And one of the mistakes I make in life when it comes to writing and communication, especially when I do a post, and some of you probably already know what this answer is going to be, is you miss a word. My brain moves too fast sometimes. And it took me, it was literally, I think, 3 weeks that I worked on that. But the construction of that book was over almost a 6 week period that I made notes. And then I got it, memorialized it, all for about a 2 hour window. And went extraordinarily well. And it's springboarded us to a lot of where we are, and most importantly, a belief that we had something, but it took that long. And I often find that, Rob, there's so many people that try to wing everything, and that can only work so far. It's like the person that never practices but expects to perform in a game. And so it's no different here. I That's how long it took. And
Yeah.
how many times did you see this, did others see that book, that ultimately it was changed? It was changed right up to the last day.
Very Steve Jobs of you. The Apple CEO would announce new projects, iPad, for example, the iPod, all those big things that Apple did. Steve Jobs would prepare for days and days and days and rehearse and hours and hours and hours and hours to get the presentation right. Because when you're launching a new product, you can't wing it. You got to get people excited about it, and you got to be excited about it. So to be able to launch the 1,000 songs in your pocket, which was the tagline that they used when they launched the iPod, that gets you excited. But that doesn't just come without work. That phrase doesn't come without just winging it. It's like, oh, it just came to me on the stage. Yeah, sure, you can have brilliant moments on the stage, but the more you prepare, like Patrick just showed us how, the better your chances for success. So, what if we talked about, Patrick, challenging conversations, difficult ones, whether they're work conversations, whether they're marriage related? You have a whole slew of children and grandchildren. And sometimes being a dad, you got to have difficult conversations with your kid. When you're married for as long as you've been married, you have to go through challenging times in marriages. What advice do you have, and with your business background as well, for navigating those difficult conversations?
Couple things, a couple answers to that. One, and it's a note that I made earlier when you were chatting. I learned this I went to a private Catholic university in the Twin Cities, where I'm originally from. I graduated from now the University of St. Thomas. And one of the classes you had to take was marriage, the Catholic marriage. And I grew up Catholic. And so you think you know all the answers. Here I am now. I graduated in the early 90s, and it's now 2024. And this message nearly 30 years later still sticks with me. And it's something I apply in a lot of, you got to ask yourself, is this a difficult conversation first? So this method is, it's halt. Never have a difficult conversation when you're hungry, angry, feeling lazy, or you're just outright tired, because you are begging for a bad result. And it may be that this is even a difficult situation. You made it difficult because you're hungry, angry, lazy, or tired. So first ask yourself, is this conversation necessary? If it is, make sure you're in the right mindset to have it. So that's number one. Secondly, and this is something that I've coached people and have to trigger myself, is if Rob and I are having a conversation and it comes down to business, then it's I literally say, okay, Rob, let's actually talk some business now, some numbers. It's coaching myself to say is okay, the funny stuff, the stuff about biz and the things we were talking about hockey earlier, and some other fun things that I know we could chat about. It's time to talk business. You're setting the tone that, okay, pleasantries are over. We're going to now negotiate. We're going to have a conversation about life. We're going to have a conversation about your performance. And don't mince words as to what you're here to talk about. If you're here to address performance, say, okay, we're now here. We're going to talk some important stuff. We're going to talk about your performance. And whether it's positive or negative, I mean, I always don't want to make that conversation to be that it's the hard stuff, but you can't mince words. And I think that something that most of the time I choose my words wisely, but not all the time. And I think it's most people have it in them that they want to be nice, but sometimes being nice is hurt where you don't get out what needs to be said. So I made one last mental note is sometimes you just have to say what needs to be said enough times to the right people. And you need to say what needs to be said. You need to say it enough. You need to show up on time. You need to have a good attitude. You need to do this way. You need to say it enough times, remind them, but make sure you're saying it to the right audience because you could be talking to the wrong person and they might not be the decision maker. They might not be a vested party. They might not even be involved. So those are difficult conversation things, but I circle back to is make sure that it is a difficult conversation first and that you're ready to have it. And if you're not, I forget what that professor's name was, but it's golden advice that I use still today most of the time.
Especially the A. If you're angry, don't talk. Be quiet. Go outside and yell if you have to. Just do not communicate in anger because that's definitely a recipe for disaster.
Yes.
Speaking from someone who's done that many times in my life and probably will continue to do so in the future.
And if you haven't done that, then you're just not being honest with yourself. I mean, that is, I listen, we've all had wins and losses in life, personal, business, things we wish we could do differently. And we've talked about some of those, and we don't need to rehash here on the podcast today. But the reality is if you're not self-reflecting, you're not improving, you're not growing, you're not learning. And that just communication, I mean, communication, it's long said, is at the root of many, many problems. And be honest with yourself when it comes down to that very fact. If you say something, it's gold. If you meant to say something and you didn't or weren't clear, it never happened. And so we could talk all day about that one, but the reality is that's the truth.
Yeah. I I've learned this lesson the hard way because I think there's really two main ways of communication, Patrick, is obviously the external communication. You and I, that's what we're doing right now. You're talking to your boss, you're talking to your spouse. When you're communicating, that's your external. But it's also your internal, the conversation you have with yourself that determines often what you say to others. So if you are angry, and this happens to me in the car, but used to a lot. This is where I worked on not communicating in anger because I realize I have a process I call the RAP process, Patrick, and this is really to work on my internal communication. So number one, the R in RAP stands for recognize. For me, my anger hits me in my jaw. So I trained myself to really focus on that feeling in that jaw. And it's like feels like it's on fire, right? Like many people feel when they're angry. Some people it's your chest or wherever it is for you. And once I feel that, I'm like, okay, that is a sign. Okay, the second step is assess. What is going on around me that prompted that reaction. So for me, there's a supermarket about a mile and a half up the street, supermarket I go to all the time. But when I started to get to P, which is process, so now that I've recognized I've got my anger in my jaw, I've assessed someone cut me off in traffic right next to the supermarket, I started to dig in a little bit. And when I processed it, I remembered that an old radio show host I used to work with, the guy I actually moved to Phoenix to work with, he got in a major accident right outside that supermarket. So for me, there's fear there. So the fear turns into anger. The person cut me off. I yell a bunch of swear words. But now that I've worked on this process, I still get angry. I still feel the fear and the anger. But because I processed it, I understand where it comes from. So now I know not to yell and swear and hoot and holler, which again, I'm not perfect because sometimes people still cut me off and I still, but I'm much better at recognizing and giving myself a second to really consider what I'm about to say. And that process helped me tremendously for those difficult conversations when I'm angry, when I'm hungry, when I'm lazy, and when I'm tired. To halt what I'm about to say.
Yeah. In I mean, we live in this society, though the people that are going to excel, in my view, are the ones that succeed at what you've discussed, what I talked about, that apply it, because we're in such a world where people just, I'm going to get on Twitter and say that this person's an idiot, and they can get a fake name and a fake handle, and you're firing stuff off and you're fighting with, but first of all, what are you doing? Because that's really, you're fighting with strangers. Nobody cares. I mean, I like that one T-shirt that I love to wear, shirts that have sayings on them. One says, "Nobody cares, work harder." It's really what it comes down to. And the reality is, work harder, work smarter, learn these different things. And
Use your skills.
yeah,
Enhance your skills and use them.
you play with your driver 3-wood, leave your hit the ball far enough so you could just use a wedge. How about that? Pretty decent with that. But a 7 and 8 iron.
Yeah, get out of that seven, get out of that uncomfortable range. Get to the nice, safe range where you can perform well. Absolutely.
It's what it all is. Well, Rob, we're nearing the end of this segment, and we're going to do some more. But I have to do the break time minute. I'll let you go first this time because I've gone first in the last two. So, what would be your break time minute of this episode?
I'm going to use you, Patrick. Patrick is incredibly smart, incredibly successful, and has created numerous opportunities for himself. And he explained how he's used communication to get there. So if you just go back, rewind the tape, listen to this episode again, take notes of what Patrick said, no matter what line of business or work that you're in, listen to what he said, recreate your own style. You will also put yourself in great positions like Patrick has done routinely throughout his career.
Well, thank you, Rob. You've ducktailed off a couple things, but I'm actually going to jump back to a skill. My break time minute is the one that I talked about, and you said, listen to yourself talk. You want to get better at communication and apply some of the things that Rob coaches and teaches. Starts with looking at yourself, listening to how you sound, and want to be better and know that you can be. And Rob talked about you could go like this to I listen, just record on your phone, take your phone out, record and listen to yourself talk and work on how you sound, because it is amazing when you communication and you're on a roll. It's like I've had too many cups of coffee and you're rolling. It's also when you're at your best, and that will feed other things in your life. And so that's what I challenge everybody to work on, that skill, to be confident in your voice, because it is that voice inside your head is 80% of what you hear. And if you like how you sound, it's only going to, just by pure osmosis, by just dumb luck, you're going to feel better about who you are and where you're headed. So Rob Hunter is, as we've discussed in our other segments, and you've heard, he is an expert, folks. It's not that he's got this great voice. It's not that he's been on the radio for 30 years. I'm going to be blunt. He knows his shit. He knows his stuff, and he can impact you. And somebody, for me, I read his things and I make notes. And I mean, I've got a paper full of stuff. Rob, how can they reach you? Where can they find you?
LinkedIn, I'm Rob Hunter. I am Rob Hunter, or robhunter.me. That's just a quick website with all my link tree. You can access me there however you want. So you want to send me a direct message? Awesome. You got a communication question? Hit me up. We'll get you an answer.
So, folks, Rob Hunters, he's a better guy than he is a coach. Rob, it's been a pleasure to have you on these episodes. Looking forward to a few more.
No doubt. Thank you, Patrick. This is awesome.